This presentation contains descriptions of mythological violence and death. Viewer discretion is advised. He ran. He didn't dare look back, but he could hear her. He could hear the squelching sound of her rotting flesh, the chittering of the maggots that swarmed her body. This wasn't the woman he had married. This wasn't the goddess who had stood with him on the floating bridge of heaven. This was a monster, a demon queen of the underworld, her beautiful form now a vessel for the 8 deities of thunder, born from the decay of her own corpse. He threw a comb from his hair and it instantly grew into a wall of bamboo shoots, a desperate, magical barrier. It barely slowed her down. He could hear her shrieks, the guttural commands to the hags of the underworld, ordering them to bring him back. This was Izanagi, the father of gods, and he was running for his life from his own wife, his sister, his other half, the goddess Izanami. He finally reached the pass, the border between the land of the living and the land of the dead, and with all his remaining strength, he rolled a boulder into the entrance, sealing her inside forever. From the other side he heard her final terrifying curse. "My beloved husband," she screamed, her voice dripping with the venom of the grave. "Because you have done this, I will kill 1,000 people in your lands every day." And from the world of light, gasping for breath, he sealed their fate with his reply. "Then my beloved wife, I will ensure that 1,500 are born every day." How did it come to this? How did the divine love story that created a nation, a love that literally churned the oceans and gave birth to islands, end in a horrifying vow of daily mass murder? To understand the curse, you have to understand the love story. To understand the darkness, you must first see the light. And to do that, we have to go back. Back before the islands, before the mountains, before the sun and the moon. Back to the very beginning. In the beginning, there was only chaos. A vast, silent, limitless ocean of oily, formless matter. The universe was a raw, unwritten potential. Out of this silence, the first gods emerged. They weren't gods like you might imagine, with arms and legs and faces. They were pure concepts, forces, the masters of the center of heaven, the high producers, the divine producers. They came into being and then they hid themselves away, their purpose served. After them, more generations of gods, known as the Koto Amaterasu, flickered into existence, each one a step closer to the tangible physical world we know. They were the primordial architects, sketching the blueprints of reality. For 7 generations, these divine beings came and went, until finally the universe produced its masterwork. The last and greatest of the celestial gods. A brother and a sister. A divine pair destined not just to exist, but to create. Their names were Izanagi no Mikoto, he who invites, and Izanami no Mikoto, she who invites. They were young, perfect, and brimming with cosmic energy. The elder gods, the formless ones who had come before, gathered and gave this final perfect pair a single monumental task: to take the drifting chaotic soup of the world and give it form, to finish the creation, to make the land. To aid them, they were given a tool of immense power, a heavenly jeweled spear called Aim no Nuboko. With this spear and their divine mandate, Izanagi and Izanami descended to the bridge that connected the heavens to the world below, the Amano-Okihashi, the floating bridge of heaven. They stood there side by side, looking down at the endless swirling brine of the primordial ocean. Imagine that moment, the weight of creation on your shoulders, the entire fate of a world resting on your next move. What would you do? Where would you even begin? Izanagi and Izanami held the spear together. They lowered its gleaming tip into the chaos, plunging it deep into the thick, salty sea. They began to churn. They stirred and stirred, the spear swirling through the formless matter, the cosmic brine thickening around it. When they felt the world begin to take substance, they lifted the spear out of the ocean. A single heavy drop of salty brine fell from its tip. The drop fell through the mist, solidified, and became the very first piece of solid ground in the universe. An island. They named it Onagoro, the self-forming island. It was the center of the world, their first home, the stage upon which the drama of creation would unfold. Descending from the floating bridge, they set foot on this new land. The air was new, the earth was new. Everything was a blank canvas. To consecrate their union and their new world, they erected a mighty pillar, the august heavenly pillar, and built a grand palace around it. It was here they would perform the ritual that would bind them together and allow them to populate the world with their divine children, the islands and gods of Japan. The plan was simple. They would circle the pillar in opposite directions, and when they met, they would unite. They began to walk. Izanagi went to the left, Izanami to the right. As they came around the pillar and saw each other, their divine forms radiant against the new earth, Izanami, filled with joy, spoke first. "Oh," she exclaimed, "what a truly handsome and splendid youth." Izanagi replied, "What a truly beautiful and splendid maiden." They believed the ritual was complete. They united, and in time, Izanami gave birth to their first child. But something was terribly, horribly wrong. The child was not a god. It was not an island. It was a monstrosity. It was born without bones, a soft, pulsating creature like a slug or a leech. They named it Hirako, the leech child. It couldn't stand, it couldn't even hold its own form. It was a failure, a divine miscarriage. Horrified and ashamed, Izanagi and Izanami placed their boneless child into a boat made of reeds and cast it out onto the ocean, abandoning it to the currents of fate. Their perfect creation had been stained by imperfection. Their first act of procreation had resulted in deformity. What had they done wrong? Distraught, they ascended once more to the heavens to seek the counsel of the elder gods. They explained the ritual, the pillar, their words of love, and the monstrous result. The ancient, formless gods listened, and their judgment was swift and absolute. The ritual had been violated. The cosmic order had been broken. It was the woman's fault, the gods decreed. In this sacred rite, the male deity, must always be the first to speak. You allowed the female to speak first, and that is why your child was malformed. It was a simple yet profound mistake, a violation of a celestial protocol they didn't even know existed. The natural order in their world demanded a specific hierarchy. Armed with this new, critical knowledge, Izanagi and Izanami returned to the island of Onagoro, to the heavenly pillar. They had to try again. They had to get it right. Everything depended on it. Once more, they stood on opposite sides of the pillar. Once more, they began to walk. The fate of their world, the shape of their family, the very nature of their creation hung in the balance of this one single moment. As they met again, the air thick with anticipation, Izanagi looked at his beautiful sister-wife, and this time he spoke first. "Ah, what a truly graceful and beautiful maiden I have met." And with those words, the cosmic order clicked into place. The universe seemed to exhale, the primordial chaos receding just a little further. This time, the ritual was perfect. The male god had initiated. The divine feminine had responded. They came together not as equals in speech, but as complementary forces, a lock and a key turning in unison to unlock the potential of the empty world. Their union was sanctified, blessed by the silent heavens, and from this perfect joining, creation could truly begin. What followed was not a simple act of shaping land from clay or commanding mountains to rise. It was a birth, a literal, divine, and profoundly intimate process. Izanami, the mother goddess, began to bear children. But these were not children of flesh and bone. Her firstborn was an island. From the churning brine, a landmass was born, pushed forth from the goddess's womb into the world. They named it Awaji, the foam path, a stepping stone in the sea. It was a start, a beautiful but humble beginning. But the divine couple was just getting started. Soon after, Izanami gave birth again, this time to a much larger and more complex child. This was Io, the island we now know as Shikoku, a place of 4 faces, for ancient provinces bound together into one body. Then came the twin islands of Oki, remote and mysterious. And then a giant, another sprawling land with 9 faces, the island of Tsukushi, which would one day be called Kyushu. With each birth, the world became more solid, more real. The empty sea was being populated with the foundations of a nation. The smaller islands of Iki and Tsushima followed, acting as sentinels, bridges to the vast continent that lay beyond. Then came Sato, a rugged and lonely child. And finally, the greatest of them all. The last of these island children to be born was a colossal landmass, the Heartland, the main island. They called it Yamato, the Great Yamato, the island that would become Honshu, the center of the world they were building. Together, these 8 great islands formed the Oyashima, the first country, the physical body of Japan. Izanagi and Izanami looked upon their work, their 8 children of earth and stone resting in the blue ocean, and they were pleased. They had created a home. But a home is more than just land. A house is not a home without a family to fill it. The islands were the body, but now they needed a soul. They needed gods. And so the divine couple began to give birth again. But this time, their children were not of land, but of spirit. They were the kami, the countless deities that would inhabit and define every aspect of the world. They gave birth to the god of the great sea, who would govern the tides and the waves that crashed upon the shores of their island children. They bore the kami of the harbors and the straits, to guide sailors and protect fishermen. They created the god of the wind, whose breath would rush through the valleys and bend the trees. And speaking of trees, they gave birth to the kami of the trees themselves, and the kami of the plains and the rich soil. They created the god of the mountains, whose stony spine formed the backbone of their islands. With every new child, the world grew richer, more complex, more alive. They birthed the kami of clay and the kami of the home, of food and of rivers. A whole pantheon of divine beings flowed from their union, each taking its place in the grand cosmic architecture. The world was filling with purpose, with power, with life. Izanagi and Izanami were a whirlwind of creation, a perfect engine of divinity. Their love was literally building a universe. It seemed as though their power was limitless, their future a golden road stretching into eternity. They had created the land, and now they were creating the very forces of nature that would govern it. But creation is a double-edged sword. It is a force of immense power, but it is also a force of immense danger. And in their divine fervor, they were about to give birth to a child so powerful, so elemental, that it would shatter their perfect world forever. Izanami went into labor one last time, but this was different. From the very beginning, this birth was an agony unlike any she had ever known. A searing, unbearable heat grew within her, a fire consuming her from the inside out. Her divine body, which had birthed islands and gods of the sea and mountains, was being scorched, burned by the child in her womb. Izanagi watched in horror, helpless, as his beloved wife writhed in torment. This was not the beautiful, life-giving process they had shared before. This was a brutal, destructive force being unleashed upon the world, and it was using his wife's body as its gateway. With a final agonizing cry that echoed across the new world, Izanami gave birth to her last son. He was not a god of water or earth. He was Kagutsuchi, the incarnation of fire itself, a being of pure, destructive, untamable flame. And the cost of his birth was catastrophic. As he emerged into the world, his fiery body had ravaged his mother's. Izanami, the great mother goddess, co-creator of the world, lay mortally wounded, her divine form horribly burned by her own child. The creative act had turned on itself, and the mother of all things was now dying. Izanagi, the father of the world, knelt beside her, his heart a cold stone of dread in his chest. He looked from his beautiful, dying wife to the newborn god of fire, the cause of all this pain. The air, once filled with the triumphant energy of creation, was now thick with the smell of smoke and the chilling silence of impending death. The perfect union was broken. The endless cycle of birth had come to a devastating end, and as the life began to fade from the eyes of the mother of Japan, a new emotion was born in her husband's heart. It was not creation. It was not love. It was a cold, consuming rage that would stain the new world with its first taste of divine blood. Tears are a strange thing. For mortals, they are salt and water, a physical release for an emotion too heavy for the heart to bear alone. But for a god? For a creator deity standing on a world still cooling from its own birth? His tears were something else entirely. They were the primordial waters of sorrow, and as they fell from Izanagi's eyes, they didn't just wet the ground. They gave birth to a new goddess, Nakasawame, the crying weeping woman, a deity born from pure undiluted grief. But grief is a multi-headed beast. One head weeps, but the other snarls. The sorrow that had birthed a goddess of tears began to curdle, to boil, to transform into something sharp and terrible. The love he held for Izanami, the creative force that had built islands and populated the heavens, was now inverted. It became a black hole in his divine soul, a vacuum that could only be filled with vengeance. His gaze fell upon the cause of his agony, his own son, Kagutsuchi, the blazing wrath god, the infant whose very birth was a funeral pyre. The child, a being of pure, untamed fire, lay there, oblivious to the cosmic tragedy he had caused. He was not evil. He was simply himself, an element given form. But in Izanagi's grief-stricken eyes, he was a murderer. Izanagi rose, his divine form radiating a cold fury that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. He reached for the sword at his hip, the Aim-no-Habari, the heavenly point blade. This wasn't just any weapon. This was a 10-span sword, a blade of celestial length and power, an extension of his own creative will. But creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. The hand that can shape a mountain can also shatter it. He drew the blade, and the sound it made was not a whisper of steel, but the groan of reality itself, protesting the act that was about to unfold. The first deicide, a father, a creator, was about to destroy his own creation, his own son. With a roar that was half grief and half rage, a sound that split the heavens and shook the foundations of the new islands, Izanagi brought the heavenly point blade down upon the infant god of fire. And in that moment the universe learned a new, terrible lesson, that even gods can bleed. But the blood of a god is not like the blood of a mortal. It is not merely life fluid. It is potential. It is essence. It is pure creative energy, and it cannot be simply spilled and wasted. As the blood of Kagutsuchi splattered across the rocks, new gods, new kami, sprang into existence, born from the violence. The blood that dripped from the tip of Izanagi's sword formed a trinity of deities, including Iwasaku and Nisaku, the gods of rock-splitting and root-splitting, embodying the sheer, violent power of the sword strike itself. Another droplet formed Mikahayahai, the swift, fearsome deity, a god of the speed and terror of the descending blade. The blood that splattered onto the sword's hilt, where Izanagi's own hand gripped it, gave birth to gods of thunder and fire, a divine echo of the father's rage and the son's essence. Takamikazuchi, the brave, awful-possessing male deity, a fearsome god of thunder and swordsmanship, was born from this bloody union of weapon and wielder. The act of destruction had become an explosion of creation. It was a horrifying paradox. In his quest to avenge the death of his wife by killing his son, Izanagi was inadvertently continuing the very work he had shared with her. He was populating the world, but not with gods of harmony and life. He was birthing gods of violence, power, and fury. The world was not just being created anymore. It was being defined by its first great tragedy. But Izanagi wasn't finished. The rage was a fire of its own, and it had to burn itself out. He didn't just kill Kagutsuchi. He dismembered the body of the fire god, and from each part of the slain deity more kami arose. From his head came Masakai Matsumi, the god of the mountain slopes. From his chest, Odo Yamatsumi, the god of the mountain passes. From his arms, the gods of the outer mountains, and from his legs, the gods of the mountain foothills. Even in death and dismemberment, the son of Izanagi and Izanami gave form to the world, his body becoming the very topography of the islands his parents had raised. His essence, the untamable fire, was now anchored, contained within the structure of the land itself. The volcanoes that would one day dot the landscape of Japan were, in essence, the fragmented, buried spirit of Kagutsuchi. When the final cut was made, Izanagi stood panting, his great sword dripping with the essence of his own son. The rage, having no more fuel, finally subsided, and in its place the grief returned, 100 times heavier than before. The bloody act of vengeance had done nothing. It hadn't healed the wound. It hadn't quieted the screaming in his soul. Izanami was still gone. He had killed his son, birthed a host of violent and chaotic gods, and stained the new world with its first murder. And for what? He was still alone. He fell to his knees and wept. He wept for his wife, the light of his existence, now a cold, still form. He wept for his son, whose life he had extinguished in a moment of madness. He wept for the perfect world they had meant to create, a world now scarred by death and sorrow before it had even truly begun. His tears, the tears of a creator god in despair, flowed into the earth, and from them, another goddess was born. This was the goddess of the Unim clan, a testament to the fact that even a god's sorrow is a creative force. But this creation brought no comfort. It was a hollow echo of the joy he had once known. Every new god born from his pain was just another reminder of what he had lost. He looked at the body of his beloved Izanami, and a new thought began to form in his mind. It was a desperate, insane thought, one that defied all the new rules of their universe, the rules of life and death. He had created this world. He had created the gods that inhabited it. Surely, the laws that governed it did not apply to him. Surely he could undo this. He could fix it. Death was a new concept, a new place, a dark, unknown land that had just claimed its first divine soul. It was called Yomi-no-kuni. The land of gloom, the underworld. It was a place of finality, a one-way passage from which nothing and no one was meant to return. But Izanagi was not just anyone. He was the father of all, the great god who had stood on the bridge of heaven and churned chaos into existence. Logic, reason, and the nascent laws of the cosmos meant nothing next to the sheer, overwhelming power of his love and his loss. He would not accept this. He would not allow the darkness to keep her. He would walk into the land of gloom itself. He would face the shadows, the decay, and the unknown horrors of the underworld. He, a god of life and light, would journey into the heart of death and darkness. He would find his Izanami, and he would bring her back. It was a quest born of pure, defiant love, a refusal to accept the unacceptable. It was a plan with no precedent and no guarantee of success. And it would be the single greatest mistake of his eternal life. The land of Yomi-no-kuni was not a place on any map. It was not reached by ship or by foot in the conventional sense. It was a descent, a journey not across the world but out of it. Izanagi, his heart a cold stone of grief in his chest, began his walk. He left behind the vibrant islands, the scent of salt and cherry blossoms, the warmth of the sun he had helped create. The path he took led downwards, always downwards. The light of the living world began to fade, not like a sunset, but like a candle being slowly snuffed out. The air grew thin and cold, carrying a faint, cloying scent of damp earth and decay. The cheerful sounds of nature, the birds, the rustling leaves, the crashing waves were replaced by a profound, unnerving silence. A silence so total it felt like a pressure against his eardrums. This was the borderland, the twilight threshold between what is and what was. He walked for what felt like an eternity, the only sound the soft scuff of his own sandals on the gray, lifeless soil. Eventually, through the perpetual gloom, a structure began to take shape. It was a gate, a colossal, imposing gate, built of a dark, unidentifiable stone that seemed to drink what little light remained. Beyond it stood a palace, a fortress of shadows, its architecture vast and foreboding. This was the entrance to Yomi, the land of the dead. There was no guard, no keeper, for none was needed. The sheer, crushing finality of the place was a barrier more potent than any army. Izanagi approached the gate, his divine nature warring with the primal fear that gripped him. He called out, his voice sounding small and fragile in the immense stillness. "Izanami, my beloved, it is I, Izanagi." His voice was swallowed by the silence. For a long moment there was nothing. Hope, a flickering flame he had carried all this way, began to die. He called out again, louder this time, his voice cracking with desperation. "Izanami, please, I have come for you." And then a sound, a slow, grating noise from behind the massive gate. And a voice. It was her voice, but it was horrifyingly different. It was thin, hollow like the rustle of dry leaves. It lacked the warmth, the life, the music he remembered. "My dearest husband," the voice whispered, a sound that seemed to come from a great distance. "Why have you come? Why have you followed me to this dreadful place?" Tears streamed freely down Izanagi's face, tears of relief and sorrow all at once. "I have come to bring you home," he pleaded, pressing his hands against the cold, unyielding stone of the gate. "The lands we created are not complete without you. I am not complete without you. The world is unfinished. Our work is unfinished. Please come back with me." There was a long, agonizing pause. The silence of Yomi pressed in again. When her voice returned, it was heavy with a terrible sadness. "It is too late, my love. I cannot go back. I have already eaten of the food of this land. I have tasted the fruit from the hearth of Yomi. I am one of them now. I belong to this darkness." The word struck Izanagi like a physical blow. He had come so far, fueled by a love that he believed could conquer anything, even death itself. To be told it was for nothing was a pain deeper than any he had ever known. "No," he choked out. "I refuse to accept that. There must be a way. Ask the gods of Yomi. Plead with them. Tell them our work is not done. Tell them the world needs its mother." He could almost feel her hesitation through the gate. He could sense the conflict in her spectral heart. "You came all this way for me," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "You have defied the laws of existence for my sake. Very well. I will go and speak with the kami of Yomi. I will ask them to release me. But you must promise me something, my husband. You must promise me with all your heart. Anything. Izanagi said instantly, his own heart soaring with a renewed, desperate hope. I will promise you anything. You must wait for me here, she said, her voice firm, taking on a strange, commanding tone he had never heard before. Do not try to enter. Do not try to follow me. And above all, no matter how long it takes, you must not, under any circumstances, look upon my face. Promise me this, Izanagi. Swear that you will not look at me until I have returned to the light. It was a strange request, but in his desperation, he barely registered it. All he heard was the chance, the possibility of her return. I promise, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. I will wait. I will not look. I swear it. Then wait for me, the voice said, and then it was gone. The grating sound of a heavy inner door closing echoed through the gloom, and then once more there was only silence. And so Izanagi waited. He stood before the great gate of the underworld, a lone figure of light and life in a realm of shadow and death. An hour passed, then another. In the timeless expanse of Yomi, minutes stretched into days, and days into what felt like years. The initial flame of hope began to cool, replaced by the gnawing chill of doubt. The silence, which had been merely oppressive before, now became an active torment. It whispered to him, planting seeds of fear in his mind. Why was it taking so long? Had she been refused? Had the gods of this dark place punished her for even asking? And why this strange request? Why could he not look at her? The woman he loved more than creation itself. The woman whose face was the sun and moon to him. The thought began to fester. A suspicion, dark and terrible, started to coil in the pit of his stomach. Was she ashamed? Was she hiding something? His patience, worn thin by grief and stretched to the breaking point by the agonizing weight, finally snapped. The promise he had made, a vow sworn in the throes of desperate hope, now seemed like a foolish, unbearable burden. He had to know. He had to see her. He could not bear the uncertainty for another moment. He needed to see the face of his beloved wife, to reassure himself that she was truly there, that she was truly his Izanami. Reaching into his hair, he pulled out the ornate, many-toothed comb that bound his left bun. It was a sacred object, imbued with a small piece of his divine power. With a flick of his wrist, he broke off one of the end teeth. As it snapped, it burst into a bright, pure flame, a tiny torch in the suffocating darkness. It was an act of sacrilege, a violation of his vow, a betrayal of her trust. But in that moment he didn't care. Holding the flickering light aloft, he pushed against the great dark gate. It swung inward without a sound, and he stepped across the threshold, into the palace of the dead, to gaze upon the one thing he was forbidden to see. The air hit him first. It wasn't just cold. It was a dead, stagnant cold that had never known the sun. It was heavy, thick with the smell of damp soil, of things left to rot in the dark for eons. The silence was next. It was a physical presence, a crushing weight that pressed in on his ears, so absolute that he could hear the frantic drumming of his own heart, the rush of divine blood through his veins. This was Yomi-no-kuni, the land of the dead, a gloomy, desolate wasteland stretching into an infinite, starless night. There was no light, save for the tiny, sputtering flame from the tooth of his comb. It cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. He held it out, a pathetic little star against an ocean of black. The ground beneath his feet was soft and yielding, a mixture of mud and what felt like ash. He took a step, then another, his sandals making a soft, squelching sound that was obscenely loud in the suffocating quiet. He called her name. Izanami. The sound died the moment it left his lips, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. There was no echo, no reply, just the endless, horrifying silence returning to crush him. He was the only living thing here. The warmth of his body, the light from his flame, the very breath in his lungs, it all felt like a blasphemy in this place of endings. But he pressed on. What else could he do? His grief was a compass, his love a map, guiding him through the featureless gloom. He walked for what felt like an eternity. Time had no meaning here. The sun did not rise or set. There was only the unchanging, perpetual twilight. He passed through landscapes of shadow, past gray, listless rivers that flowed with something thicker than water, and saw shapes moving at the very edge of his light. Hunched, shuffling things that would scuttle away from his flame. Their whispers like the dry rustling of leaves. He called her name again, his voice now raw with desperation. Izanami, my love. Where are you? And this time a response. It wasn't a voice, not at first. It was more like a feeling, a faint stirring in the dead air, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Why have you come? It was her. It was his Izanami, but her voice, it was wrong. It was thin, brittle, like the sound of wind through a cracked reed. It lacked all the warmth, all the life that had once defined her. But it was her. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through him. I have come to bring you back, he shouted, turning in a slow circle, trying to find the source of the sound. The lands we created are not finished. The world is incomplete without you. I am incomplete without you. Please come home with me. The whisper answered, closer now. He could sense a presence just beyond the reach of his light, shrouded in the impenetrable dark. It is too late, my love. I cannot go back. No, he cried, taking a step toward the unseen presence. It is never too late. We are gods. We can do anything. Not here, the voice sighed, and the sound was filled with a sorrow so profound it chilled him to the bone. I have already eaten from the hearth of Yomi. I have tasted the food of this land. Its essence is now a part of me. I belong to the dead now. The laws of this place cannot be broken, not even by us. Izanagi fell to his knees, the muddy ash soiling his divine robes. The flame on his comb flickered, threatening to die. I don't accept that. There must be a way. I will not leave without you. There was a long pause. The shuffling things in the dark grew silent, as if the entire underworld was holding its breath. Then her voice returned, a fragile thread of hope in the suffocating despair. You are stubborn. A hint of the old Izanami, a ghost of a memory in her tone. Very well. Your love has moved me. I will go and speak with the great gods of Yomi. I will plead with them. Perhaps they will make an exception. Perhaps they will grant me my release. Izanagi's head shot up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Truly? You will try. I will, she whispered. But you must make me a promise. A sacred vow. While I am gone, you must wait here. And you must not, under any circumstances, attempt to look upon me. Do not try to find me in this darkness. Do you swear it? I swear it, he said without a moment's hesitation. I will wait. I will not look. Only hurry back to me. Do not break your promise, my love, the voice warned, already fading. Wait for me in the dark. And then she was gone. The presence vanished. The silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. He was alone again. So he waited. He sat in the cold, damp ash, the tiny flame of his comb his only companion. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground, honoring his promise. At first, his heart was filled with a nervous, soaring hope. She was coming back. They would be together again. They would finish creating Japan. They would fill the world with gods and life. But the wait stretched on. Minutes bled into what felt like hours. Hours into what felt like days. In the timeless abyss of Yomi, his mind began to fray. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with insidious whispers, taunts from the shadows just beyond his light. The darkness was no longer just an absence of light. It felt like a living entity, pressing in on him, trying to snuff out his flame and his hope. Doubt, like a cold poison, began to seep into his heart. Had she lied to him? Was this a trick? A cruel joke by the gods of the underworld? Or worse, had they refused her? Was she now a prisoner forever? And he was left to wait for a return that would never come? His patience, worn thin by grief and fear, finally snapped. The suspense was a physical torment, far worse than the silence or the cold. He had to know. He had to see her. He needed the reassurance of her face, to see with his own eyes that she was all right. His promise, made so easily in a moment of hope, now felt like an impossible burden. Love and desperation waged a war within him, and desperation won. He thought, one quick look. What harm could it do? I just need to see her. He stood up, his legs stiff. He took the larger, many-toothed comb that held his long hair in a bun, the sacred Mizura knot. With trembling hands, he broke off one of its thick wooden teeth. He touched it to the tiny flame of his first light, and it caught, flaring into a proper torch. The sudden brightness was blinding. It pushed back the oppressive darkness, illuminating a vast, cavernous hall he hadn't known he was in. The air was hazy with a strange mist, and in the center of the hall he saw a shape. a figure lying on a raised platform, a funeral bier. It was Izanami. He took a hesitant step forward, lifting the torch higher. The warm golden light washed over her form. His heart seized in his chest. His breath hitched in his throat, and a scream, a raw primal sound of pure terror, was torn from his soul. Because the woman lying on the slab, the thing he had illuminated in the forbidden light, was not the beautiful goddess he remembered. It was a corpse, a rotting, putrefying husk of what was once his wife. Her beautiful raven-black hair was now a tangled, matted nest, crawling with maggots that writhed like a living carpet over her scalp. Her skin, once as smooth and pale as polished stone, was sloughing off her bones, a grotesque patchwork of greens and blacks, bloated with the gases of decay. Her eyes, those deep, loving pools he had lost himself in countless times, were gone. In their place were two hollow black sockets, from which a thick, dark fluid oozed down her sunken cheeks. Her mouth was agape, a silent scream frozen on her face, but it was not empty. It was filled with squirming, writhing life, the foul children of decomposition. And it was worse, so much worse than just decay. For nestled in the ruin of her body, new and terrible life had taken root. From her head, a great thunder spirit had been born, a being of crackling dark energy. From her chest, a fire thunder deity feasted on her heart. In her belly, a black thunder god pulsed with malevolence. 8 of these monstrous thunder deities were birthed from her decay, clinging to her limbs and torso like parasitic growths, their forms crackling with the destructive energy of the underworld. This was the sight that greeted Izanagi. This was the truth of Yomi. This was his beloved Izanami. The light from his flaming comb trembled, casting dancing, monstrous shadows across the cavern walls. The sight was so abhorrent, so fundamentally wrong, that his mind simply refused to process it. He stood frozen, the scream still dying in his throat, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. And then the corpse moved. 2 hollow sockets slowly, impossibly, turned to face him. The jaw, loose on its hinges, snapped shut with a wet, sickening crack. A voice, not the melodious voice of his wife, but a dry, sepulchral rasp, a sound like gravestones grinding together, echoed from the thing on the slab. "You have shamed me." The words were not a lament. They were a curse. They were a judgment. The last vestiges of love in Izanagi's heart were instantly vaporized, replaced by a cold, primal terror that was absolute. He had broken his promise. He had looked upon her, and in doing so, he had not just seen her decay. He had exposed her shame to the light of the living world. He had violated the sanctity of her death. "You have shamed me," the voice rasped again, louder this time, filled with a rage that was as vast and as cold as the underworld itself. The rotting form began to sit up, bits of flesh and maggots raining down onto the stone slab. The 8 thunder deities clinging to her body stirred, their shadowy forms crackling with newfound energy. Izanagi didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply acted. He turned and ran. He scrambled out of the chamber, his feet slipping on the damp stone, the flickering light of his comb his only guide. Behind him he heard a shriek of pure fury, a sound that would haunt his nightmares for eternity. And then the thunderous, heavy footsteps of something immense giving chase. "Bring him to me." Izanami's voice boomed through the caverns. "Do not let him escape this land." He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw them. Pouring out of the chamber behind Izanami's monstrous form were the Shikome, the foul hags of the underworld. Their forms were twisted and demonic, with stringy hair and claws like daggers. They were impossibly fast, their shrieks echoing off the stone as they gained on him. Panic seized him. He was a god, yes, but this was their realm. The air was thick, heavy, and it clung to him, slowing his limbs. The hags were closing the distance, their grasping claws reaching for him. In a moment of desperate inspiration, he reached up and tore the black vine headdress from his hair. It was a divine artifact, woven with the power of creation. Without a second thought, he hurled it behind him. The moment it hit the ground, it burst into life. Not with fire or lightning, but with a sprawling verdant grapevine, laden with bunches of huge, ripe wild grapes. The Shikome, driven by the base hunger of the dead, skidded to a halt. They fell upon the fruit with ravenous cries, tearing the grapes from the vine and stuffing them into their mouths, their pursuit momentarily forgotten in their gluttonous frenzy. Izanagi didn't wait to see if it would hold them for long. He sprinted onward, deeper into the winding, lightless tunnels of Yomi. He had to reach the pass, the slope that led back to the world of the living. But the underworld was a maze, and the shrieks of the hags were already starting up again behind him, their hunger sated, their rage renewed. Soon he heard a new sound joining the pursuit. A low, rumbling hum like a massive hornet's nest, accompanied by the crackle of electricity. He glanced back again. His blood ran cold. The 8 thunder deities, now detached from Izanami's body, were flying after him, leading a vast army of Yomi's warriors. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of them, a legion of the damned, their shadowy forms brandishing spears and swords. The ground trembled with their approach. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was running out of time, running out of options. His hand went to his hair, to the other side of his head, and his fingers found the intricate teeth of his sacred comb, the very comb whose flame had revealed the horror he now fled. He ripped it from his hair, snapping its teeth with a sharp crack, and threw the pieces over his shoulder. Where the pieces of the divine comb landed, the ground erupted. Instantly, a dense, impassable thicket of bamboo shoots sprouted from the cavern floor. They grew with impossible speed, creating a forest of thick green stalks that blocked the tunnel completely. The army of Yomi crashed into the sudden barrier. Their advance halted. Izanagi could hear their roars of frustration and the crackling of the thunder gods as they tried to blast their way through. He used the precious seconds he had bought to push himself harder, his lungs burning, his divine energy waning in this dead land. He could feel it now, a slight change in the air, a subtle incline in the path. He was close. He was so close to the border. But then the bamboo forest behind him exploded in a shower of splintered wood and dark lightning. And standing in the breach, her form now fully illuminated by the hellish energy of her children, was Izanami. She was no longer the rotting corpse on the slab. She had become something far worse. Her body was a towering monstrosity of decay and shadow, her rage given physical form. She moved with a terrifying speed, her shriek of betrayal echoing as she herself now led the charge. The full, concentrated fury of the goddess of death was now bearing down on him. There were no more tricks, no more artifacts to throw. He was spent. The exit was just ahead, a faint glimmer of grayish light marking the passage back to the living world. But she was faster. He could feel her cold presence right behind him, her spectral fingers reaching for the back of his neck. It was then that he saw it. Just to the side of the path, growing miraculously at the very edge of the land of the dead, was a peach tree. It was ancient and gnarled, but it was laden with 3 large, perfect peaches, glowing with a faint, pure light that seemed to repel the darkness of Yomi. In a final, desperate act, Izanagi lunged for the tree. He ripped the 3 peaches from its branches, turned, and hurled them with all his remaining strength at the monstrous goddess and her advancing army. The effect was instantaneous. As the sacred fruit flew through the air, it pulsed with an overwhelming aura of purity and life. When the peaches struck the ground before the army, they exploded in a blinding flash of golden light. The warriors of Yomi recoiled, shrieking in pain as if burned. The thunder deities dissipated like smoke in the wind. Even the monstrous Izanami herself staggered back, shielding her hollow eyes from the sacred light, her form flickering under its purifying power. The entire legion of the underworld, the hags, the warriors, the thunder gods, turned and fled back into the depths of Yomi, unable to withstand the potent, life-affirming magic of the peaches. Izanagi didn't wait. He scrambled up the final stretch of the slope, Yamatsu-Hirasaka, the border between life and death. He burst through the mouth of the cave and into the familiar air of the living world, collapsing onto the ground, gasping for breath. But he knew Izanami was not defeated, only repelled. He could hear her enraged screams echoing up from the darkness below. She was coming. His eyes frantically searched the area and found it. A colossal boulder, a rock so massive it would take the strength of 1,000 men to move. But he was not a man. He was a god. Fueled by terror and adrenaline, he threw his entire being against the stone. It groaned, scraping against the earth as he pushed with every ounce of his divine power. He had to seal the entrance. He had to lock her away forever. The boulder began to move slowly, inch by painful inch, across the mouth of the underworld, as the sound of his vengeful, dead wife grew louder and closer from the abyss below. With a final desperate heave, the great stone ground into place. The sound was deafening, a shriek of rock on rock that echoed across the desolate landscape of the border world. It was a sound of finality, A sound of a door being closed forever. For a moment there was silence. A heavy, pregnant silence, broken only by Izanagi's ragged, desperate breaths. He leaned against the cold stone, his divine muscles screaming in protest, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The air of the living world had never tasted so sweet, so pure. Then from the other side of the boulder came her voice. It was no longer the voice of the goddess he had loved, the architect of the world with whom he had shared an eternity. This voice was different. It was thin, sharp, and laced with a venom that could curdle the very oceans. "My beloved husband," the voice hissed, the words slithering through the microscopic cracks in the stone. "Because you have done this to me, because you have shamed me and abandoned me, I will do this to you. From this day forward, I will reach out from my kingdom of Yomi, and every single day, I will take 1,000 of the people from your land of the living." The threat hung in the air, colder than any underworld wind. 1,000 souls a day. A constant, unending harvest of death. It was a curse of unimaginable scale, a promise of eternal sorrow for the world he had just fought so hard to return to. Izanagi, still trembling, pushed himself away from the boulder. He looked at his hands, the hands that had churned the primordial ocean and raised islands from the brine. He had created life. He would not let it be unmade by a queen of corpses. He stood tall, facing the stone that now served as his wife's eternal tomb and throne. He drew in a breath, not of fear but of defiance. His voice when it came was no longer the pleading whisper of a grieving husband, but the booming decree of a creator god. "My beloved wife," he called back, his voice imbued with the power of creation itself. "If you do this, if you take 1,000 lives each day, then I shall counter your decree. For every 1,000 you take, I will ensure that 1,500 new lives are born. Life will not be conquered. It will always flourish. It will always outpace your darkness." And so the great bargain was struck. The fundamental law of existence was written into the fabric of reality, not by celestial design, but by a bitter divorce at the gates of hell. Through a wall of stone, a god of life and a goddess of death set in motion the eternal, relentless cycle of mortality. For every death there would be a birth. For every sorrow a new joy. The world would be forever touched by loss, but it would also be forever renewed by life. Izanami's shriek of pure, unadulterated rage was his answer, a sound that faded as Izanagi turned his back on the underworld for the last time and began his long journey away from the shadows. He walked, but he did not feel the triumph of escape. He felt unclean. The journey to Yomi had stained him. It was a filth that no water on the mortal plane could wash away easily, a grime not of mud or dirt, but of death itself. The stench of decay seemed to cling to his skin. The sight of his wife's monstrous form was seared onto the inside of his eyelids. He was tainted by the kegar, the pollution of the underworld. This wasn't just a physical feeling. It was a spiritual poison, a deep impurity that separated him from the pure, living world he had created. He, a primordial god of creation, was now a carrier of death's contagion. He knew he could not rejoin the heavenly court in this state. He could not walk among the pristine islands he had raised. He had to cleanse himself, to purge the darkness that had soaked into the very essence of his being. He traveled until he found a river, a place of clear, running water near the sea on the island of Kyushu. The water flowed pure and fast, a perfect place for the ritual of misogi, the great purification. Stripping off his divine garments, he cast them aside, and a strange and wonderful thing began to happen. As his staff hit the ground, a new god sprang into being from it. As he tossed aside his belt, another deity was born. His clothes, his bracelets, his crown, each item he discarded, still thick with the residue of the underworld, transformed. The pollution of death, when met with the pure creative energy of Izanagi, didn't just vanish. It was transmuted. 12 gods were born from his discarded possessions alone, each one a testament to the power that still flowed through him. But the deepest stain remained on his body. He waded into the river, the cold, clear water a shocking contrast to the stagnant air of Yomi. He began to wash. He washed the upper parts of his body, and the pollution that flowed from him coalesced, creating two gods of disaster. He washed the middle parts, and more gods of misfortune were born. He washed his lower body, and yet more spirits of calamity sprang forth. He was literally washing the evil and decay of the underworld out of his soul, and as it left him, it took on a life of its own. But then, as the last of the filth was carried away by the current, something changed. The process was no longer about purging darkness, but about revealing light. The true, untainted divinity of Izanagi, now cleansed and renewed, began to shine forth with a brilliance that put the sun to shame. He submerged his head, the water swirling around him, and decided to wash his face. He washed his left eye. As the water sluiced away, a being of unimaginable radiance emerged. She was brilliant, glorious, and her light was the very essence of warmth, life, and order. This was Amaterasu and Susanoo, the great goddess of the sun. Izanagi gasped, looking at his firstborn child, a perfect being born from his own purified essence. He knew instantly she was destined to rule the heavens. He then washed his right eye. From the water emerged another deity, this one serene and graceful. His light was not the fiery blaze of the sun, but the cool, gentle, and mysterious glow of the moon. This was Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, the god of the night, a perfect counterpart to his sister, destined to govern the realm of darkness and stars. Finally, Izanagi washed his nose, and from this last act of cleansing, a third and final child was born. He was not radiant like the sun or serene like the moon. He was powerful, wild, and crackling with untamed energy. He was a force of nature personified, with a mighty roar and a spirit as turbulent as a raging sea. This was the valiant Susanoo no Mikoto, the god of storms and the ocean. Izanagi stepped out of the river reborn. The filth of Yomi was gone, replaced by a sense of profound and overwhelming joy. He looked upon his three children, the Mihashira no Yuzunomiko, the three precious children. They were the culmination of his journey, the ultimate proof that even from the darkest depths of horror and despair, something beautiful and powerful could be born. The sun, the moon, and the storm. A new pantheon had arrived, and the fate of the heavens and the earth now rested with them. And so Izanagi, the father of gods, looked upon his three radiant children, the Mihashira no Yuzunomiko, the three precious children born from his purification, to his daughter Amaterasu and Susanoo, whose brilliance outshone all creation. He bestowed the grandest of all realms. He gave her his sacred Yasakani no Magatama bead necklace, a jewel of immense power, and declared, "You shall rule the high plane of heaven Takama no Hara. You will bring light, order, and harmony to the cosmos." To his second child, the serene and beautiful Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, born from the washing of his right eye, he gave dominion over the night. "You," he ordained, "shall govern the realm of the night, a kingdom of silver light and quiet mystery, a counterpart to your sister's day." And finally, to his youngest son, the wild and tempestuous Susanoo no Mikoto, born from the cleansing of his nose, he gave the vast and churning seas. "You," Izanagi commanded, "shall rule the plains of the ocean." The universe, it seemed, was finally in balance, a perfect celestial triumvirate, each with their role, each with their realm. But balance, especially when dealing with gods of such immense and volatile power, is a fragile, fleeting thing. The first crack in this divine order came not from the storm, but from the quiet silver moon. Amaterasu, the ever-benevolent sun goddess, once sent her brother Tsukuyomi as her envoy to a grand feast being held by the goddess of food, Yukimachi. When Tsukuyomi arrived, he witnessed a spectacle that filled his pristine soul with utter revulsion. Yukimachi, to produce the feast for her divine guest, did not simply cook. She faced the land, and from her mouth came a stream of perfectly cooked rice. She turned to the sea, and spat out a bounty of fish and succulent seaweed. She looked to the mountains, and from her mouth came all manner of wild game, prepared for the table. To her, this was the miracle of creation, the boundless bounty of her own body, offered as a gift. But to Tsukuyomi, the cool and detached god of the night, it was a disgusting, vulgar display. He saw it not as a gift, but as a profound insult, to be served food that was produced from another's mouth, food that was, in his eyes, polluted and unclean. In a flash of cold lunar fury, he drew his sword and struck Yukimachi down, killing the very goddess of sustenance. When word of this reached Amaterasu in the high plane of heaven, she was not just angered, she was horrified. Her own brother had violated the sacred laws of hospitality and murdered a benevolent goddess out of nothing more than sheer disgust. It was an act of unforgivable impurity. "You are an evil kami," she declared. her voice echoing through the heavens. "I never want to look upon your face again." And from that day forward, sun and moon were forever separated. Amaterasu would race across the sky, and only when she had vanished over the western horizon would Tsukuyomi dare to show his face in the east. Day and night, once siblings who shared the cosmos, were now eternal strangers, their paths never to cross again. A schism born from a single act of violence. The first wound in the new pantheon had been struck, and it had split the sky in two. But as deep as that wound was, it was nothing compared to the cataclysm brewing in the heart of the youngest brother. Susanoo, the god of storms and seas, did not want his kingdom. The endless, churning waters only mirrored the tempest in his own soul. He did not celebrate his power. He lamented his fate. He was consumed by a grief so profound it bordered on madness. He missed his mother. He missed Izanami. He wanted to go to her, to the land of Yomi, the dark, polluted realm from which his father had barely escaped with his life. And so he wept. But when a god of his magnitude weeps, the world itself breaks. His cries were not mere sounds. They were destructive forces of nature. His wailing shook the very foundations of the world, causing a long drawn-out beard to grow down to his chest. The green mountains withered and died under the salt of his divine tears. The rivers and seas began to dry up from the heat of his sorrow. An evil miasma rose from the land as his grief poisoned the air, and plagues and disasters began to stalk the world of men, all born from the inconsolable, world-breaking grief of a single god. He was a being of pure, unrestrained emotion, a howling storm of sorrow with no concept of the collateral damage he was inflicting upon the world his father had so painstakingly created. Izanagi, who had faced the horrors of Yomi and chosen to create life from it, saw his son's grief not as a touching tribute, but as a dangerous, world-breaking indulgence. He confronted his son, his voice heavy with the weight of creation. "Why do you neglect the kingdom I have given you?" he demanded. "Why do you bring ruin to the world with your endless wailing?" Through his sobs, Susanoo declared, "Because I do not want this kingdom. I wish to go to the land of my mother, to Yomi-no-kuni, the Underworld." Izanagi's patience, worn thin by creation, death, and purification, finally snapped. He saw in his son not a grieving child, but a force of pure chaos, a throwback to the formless void he had worked so hard to shape. This was the same darkness, the same pull towards death and decay, that he had fled from in Yomi. He would not allow it to unravel his creation. In a voice that boomed with the authority of the first father, he roared, "Then you may not live in this land. You are banished. Go where you will, but you will not remain here to poison my world with your despair." With that final decree, Izanagi, the great creator, receded from the world. His work was done. He had birthed the land, birthed the gods, and set the cosmic order in motion. His final act was to prune the branch that threatened the entire tree. He withdrew to a place of quiet seclusion on the island of Awaji, his role in the great epic of the gods now complete. The age of the new gods, for better or for worse, had truly begun. But Susanoo, the banished god of storms, was not one to go quietly. Before descending to the land of his mother, he had one last thing to do. "I will go," he announced to the heavens, his voice a defiant roar. "But first, I must take my leave of my elder sister, Amaterasu and Susanoo, in the high plane of heaven." As he said this, the very earth shook. The winds howled, the seas churned into a furious boil, and the mountains trembled. His ascent was not a peaceful journey, it was an invasion. He was a storm climbing into the sky, a force of chaos and rage approaching the sanctum of perfect order. Amaterasu, from her celestial palace, saw him coming. She saw the churning darkness and heard the roar of the winds that heralded his arrival. She knew her brother. She knew the untamable rage and the bottomless sorrow that burned within him. This was no friendly farewell visit. This was a challenge. And so she did not prepare a welcome, she prepared for war. The sun goddess, the embodiment of peace and light, unbound her hair and retied it in masculine knots of war. She took up a bow and 2 quivers of 1,000 arrows each. She slung a mighty sword to her side and held a spear, stamping her feet into the hard-packed earth of heaven until it shook like a marsh. She stood, waiting, a warrior of light bracing for the arrival of the storm. The fate of heaven itself was about to be decided in a confrontation between the sun and the sea, a clash of order and chaos, of sister and brother. The sound came first. a low guttural roar that wasn't thunder, but something more elemental, more violent. It was the sound of the ocean itself being torn from its bed and hurled into the sky, the ground of the high heavenly plane. A realm meant to be eternal and unshakable began to tremble. Mountains quivered, and the celestial rivers churned as if a great beast was thrashing in their depths. This was not a polite arrival. This was an invasion. Susanoo no Mikoto, the storm god, ascended. He didn't climb. He erupted. He tore through the layers of creation with the force of a hurricane, his wild, untamed energy ripping at the very fabric of the heavens. He was a maelstrom of grief and rage, and he was coming for his sister. Amaterasu stood her ground. Her hair, once a flowing river of night, was now bound up for battle. The Magatama beads at her neck and wrists, symbols of her divine authority, were no longer just ornaments, they were armor. In her hands she held a bow, an arrow nocked and ready. At her back, a quiver bristled with 1,000 more. She stamped her foot, and the divine earth compacted beneath her, becoming as hard as stone. She was no longer just the serene sun, the gentle warmth. She was a warrior queen, ready to defend her realm from the chaos she knew her brother embodied. When he finally appeared before her, he was a terrifying sight. His hair was a tangled mess, his beard unkempt, his eyes wild with a furious sorrow. He was weeping, but his tears were not of sadness, they were the salt water of a raging tempest. The air around him crackled with destructive power. "Why have you come?" Amaterasu's voice was not a question. It was a challenge, sharp and clear as the light she commanded. "Your cries have shaken the land and sea. Your place is in the deep, not here among the ordered heavens. Why do you ascend with such violence?" Susanoo, for his part, tried to mask his fury with a veneer of wounded pride. "I was cast out," he bellowed, "banished by our father for wanting to see our mother in the land of Yomi. Is it a crime to miss one's mother? I have come only to bid you farewell before I depart for the underworld. I have no ill intentions." Amaterasu looked at him, her gaze unwavering. She saw the storm raging behind his eyes, the lie coiled in his words. She knew her brother. She knew the chaos that was his heart. "You claim to have no ill intentions," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "But your arrival speaks of war and ruin. How can I trust your words when your very presence is an act of destruction? Your heart is not pure." "It is." Susanoo roared, offended. "My heart is pure and clear. I will prove it to you." "Then prove it," Amaterasu declared, lowering her bow slightly. "We will conduct a trial by pledge and yuki. We will swear an oath and bring forth children. By the nature of the children born, we will know the truth of your heart. If your intentions are pure as you claim, you will bring forth gentle goddesses. If they are filled with malice, you will bring forth aggressive gods." A strange, wild grin spread across Susanoo's face. A challenge. This he understood. "Agreed," he snarled. "Let us begin." They stood on the banks of the tranquil river of heaven. Amaterasu, radiating a calm golden light, extended her hand. "Give me your sword," she commanded. Susanoo unslung the massive 10-span sword from his back, a brutal-looking weapon, and handed it to her. Amaterasu took the blade, and with a strength that belied her serene appearance, she snapped it into 3 pieces. She rinsed them in the sacred waters of the river, the metal hissing as it touched the pure stream. Then she put the pieces in her mouth, crunched down, and blew out a shimmering mist. From that mist, 3 exquisite goddesses coalesced, each one embodying a different aspect of grace and tranquility. They bowed to their mother and took their place beside her. Amaterasu looked at her brother. "Now it is your turn. Give me the 500-bead string of Magatama from your hair." Susanoo, looking impressed despite himself, untied the sacred jewels from his wild locks and handed them to her. She, in turn, passed him the long string of comma-shaped beads that adorned her own neck. He took the glowing jewels, symbols of her sovereignty and light. He plunged them into the river, shaking them so they rattled like thunder. He put them in his mouth, crushed them between his teeth, and with a great roar, spat out a violent gust of wind. From this storm breath, 5 powerful and aggressive male gods were born, each one crackling with untamed energy. Susanoo threw back his head and laughed, a booming, triumphant sound that echoed across the heavens. "I have one," he declared. "The goddesses born from my sword were gentle, proving my heart is pure. and the gods born from your beads are male, and I have birthed more than you. My sincerity has been proven beyond all doubt. Technically, by the terms of the trial, the birth of the goddesses from his sword should have been enough to prove his sincerity. Amaterasu, perhaps wanting to believe in the possibility of her brother's reform, wanting to preserve the peace, chose to accept his declaration. She saw the goddesses and allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he had changed. It was a fatal miscalculation. For Susanoo, this victory was not a validation of his sincerity. It was a license. He had been given a pass, a divine seal of approval for his behavior. And so the storm truly broke. Emboldened and drunk on his perceived triumph, he unleashed the full force of his chaotic nature upon the high heavenly plane. First, he went to the magnificent rice paddies that Amaterasu had so carefully cultivated, the source of life and order. With a gleeful rage, he stomped through them, breaking down the levees, letting the sacred water drain away, and trampling the young shoots into the mud. His sister and the other gods pleaded with him to stop, but their words were lost in his destructive glee. Next, he found the irrigation ditches that fed the fields and filled them with rocks and dirt until they overflowed, creating a muddy, useless swamp. Then, his desecration turned truly sacrilegious. He stormed into the sacred hall where Amaterasu herself was to preside over the tasting of the first fruits of the harvest, a solemn and vital ceremony. In this holy place, a space of ultimate purity, he defecated, smearing his filth across the sacred floors and seats, an act of profound and unthinkable disrespect. The gods were horrified, but Amaterasu, though deeply wounded, tried to find excuses for him. She told the others, "He is my younger brother. His actions, though they seem malicious, are simply the result of his drunken celebration and his deep grief. He does not mean this harm." She was trying to hold her world together, trying to manage the unmanageable, to rationalize the chaos that was her own blood. But Susanoo was not finished. He was building to a crescendo of cruelty, an act so vile it would shatter the heavens. He found one of the sacred heavenly piebald horses, creatures of light and beauty that were used for divination. With a savage cry, he flayed the creature alive, skinning it from tail to head. Then, holding the dripping, bloody hide, he climbed onto the roof of the sacred weaving hall, where Amaterasu and her celestial attendants were peacefully working at their looms, weaving the garments of the gods. He tore a hole in the roof and, with a final terrible roar, hurled the mangled, skinless carcass down into the hall. The shock was absolute. Panic erupted. In the chaos and terror, one of Amaterasu's most beloved attendants, startled by the horror falling from above, stumbled backward. Her hand slipped and the shuttle from her loom, a sharp wooden tool used for weaving, flew from her grasp and pierced her own body, killing her instantly. Silence. A profound, deathly silence fell over the hall, broken only by the soft, dripping sound of blood. Amaterasu looked at the body of her faithful servant, lying dead on the floor. She looked at the grotesque carcass of the sacred horse. And in that moment, something inside the sun goddess broke. The hope she had held for her brother, the excuses she had made, the immense patience she had shown, it all evaporated, replaced by an agony that was a mixture of terror, grief, and incandescent rage. The light of the world had been violated. Order had been murdered before her very eyes. She could not bear it. She could not bear the sight of her defiled heaven, the body of her friend, the face of her monstrous brother. Overwhelmed and utterly broken, she fled. She ran until she found the Amano-Iwato, the heavenly rock cave. Without a word, she threw herself inside, and with a great final effort, rolled a massive boulder across the entrance, sealing herself away from the world. And in that instant, as the stone sealed the cave, the light went out, not just in the high heavenly plane but everywhere. The sun vanished from the sky. The central land of reed plains, the world of mortals below, was plunged into an absolute and unending darkness. The laughter of the storm god faded, replaced by a chilling silence and a cold that seeped into the very bones of creation. The world was now a lightless tomb, and all the evils of the world, all the malevolent spirits and demons, began to stir in the eternal night. Chaos had finally won. But how do you fight a darkness born of grief? How do you reason with an absence? The gods of the high plane of heaven, the Takamagara, gathered in a panicked council by the bank of the tranquil river of heaven. They were 8 million strong, a pantheon of deities great and small, Yet they were powerless before the void left by their queen. They pleaded, they reasoned, they shouted into the emptiness, but the heavenly rock cave, the Amano-Iwato, remained sealed. Amaterasu, in her profound sorrow and shame, had entombed herself, and with her she had entombed the world. For a time despair reigned. The crops withered in the fields, the rivers grew sluggish and dark, and the very air grew thin and cold. The malevolent spirits, the Oni and the Yokai, once confined to the shadows, now roamed freely, their wicked laughter echoing in the perpetual twilight. This was not a world, it was a ghost of one. The divine order established by Izanagi and Izanami was unraveling, thread by thread, undone not by a monstrous beast or a rival god, but by a broken heart. Then from the council of despairing gods, a voice of clarity emerged. It was the god Omoikane, whose name means serving one's thoughts. He was the god of wisdom and intelligence, a being whose mind could perceive solutions where others saw only dead ends. He stepped forward, his presence a small point of light in the overwhelming gloom, and he laid out a plan. It was not a plan of force, for no force could move a goddess who did not wish to be moved. It was not a plan of reason, for grief does not listen to logic. It was a plan of wit, of surprise, of divine audacious trickery. The gods, desperate for any hope, listened intently. Omoikane's plan was a performance, a grand piece of celestial theater designed for an audience of one. First, they gathered the long-crowing roosters of the eternal land and set them before the cave, hoping their chorus might trick the sun goddess into believing a dawn she had not created was breaking. Then they forged a mirror, the Yata no Kagami, so perfectly polished it could capture light that didn't even exist yet. They gathered 500 sacred sakiki trees, and from their branches, they hung long strings of kama-shaped jewels, the Yasakani no Magatama, which shimmered with a faint internal luminescence. The stage was set. All they needed was a star. And that star was Aim-no-Yuzume, the goddess of the dawn, of merriment, and of revelry. While the other gods were somber and grave, Yuzume was a being of irrepressible joy. She was the laughter at the end of a long night, the dance that breaks the solemn silence. Omoikane's plan hinged entirely on her. She approached the entrance to the cave, and with a mischievous glint in her eye, she overturned a large wooden tub, creating a makeshift drum. She began to dance. At first, it was just a simple rhythm, her feet stamping on the hollow wood, a lonely heartbeat in the silent world. But then the rhythm grew more complex, more frantic. She tied vines in her hair, she wrapped herself in moss, and she danced with a wild, untamed energy that seemed to defy the darkness around her. She was a whirlwind of motion, a force of pure, unadulterated life. She danced with such passion, such hilarious and shocking abandon, that the 8 million gods, who had been lost in their sorrow, stopped and stared. A chuckle broke the silence, then another. Soon a wave of laughter, deep and resonant, began to ripple through the divine assembly. They laughed at the sheer audacity of her performance. They laughed at the joy she was creating out of nothing. They roared with a mirth so powerful, so earth-shaking, that the high plane of heaven itself seemed to tremble. It was the sound of life refusing to surrender to the dark. Inside the cave, Amaterasu heard it. The sound pierced the stone walls and the heavy curtain of her grief. Laughter? How could there be laughter? The world was supposed to be a place of weeping and shadow, a reflection of her own misery. How could they be so happy without her? A flicker of curiosity, the first emotion other than sorrow she had felt in an age, sparked within her. She crept to the edge of the stone door and pushed it open just a crack. "Why do you laugh and celebrate?" she called out, her voice raspy from disuse. "When the world is plunged into eternal night because I am here?" Aim-no-Yuzume, without missing a beat in her dance, called back. "We rejoice because we have found a goddess more brilliant and beautiful than you, your majesty." Amaterasu was stunned. More brilliant than her? The very embodiment of the sun? Impossible. Her curiosity now fully ignited, she pushed the stone door open a little further to see this supposed rival. As she peered out, another god, Futadama, quickly held up the newly forged mirror. And for the first time, Amaterasu saw her own reflection. She saw a being of blinding light, a face of impossible radiance, a power that could banish any shadow. She was so captivated by the glorious image, so mesmerized by her own forgotten splendor, that she stepped out of the cave to get a closer look. In that instant, the strongest of the gods, Aim-no-Tajikureo, who had been hiding beside the entrance, seized her hand. With a mighty heave, he pulled her completely free of the cave, while Futadama quickly sealed the entrance behind her with a sacred rope of rice straw, a Shimenawa, forever preventing her return to that dark place. The moment Amaterasu was free, light exploded back into existence. It wasn't a gentle dawn. It was a sudden brilliant flood that washed over the universe. The sky turned from black to a brilliant azure. The withered crops stood tall and green once more. The rivers sparkled, and the malevolent spirits, shrieking in terror, fled back to the shadows where they belonged. The world was born again, not from primordial chaos, but from the depths of despair. The tale of Izanagi and Izanami is a story of creation, of a universe born from the stirring of a spear in the cosmic ocean. But it is also a story of profound loss, of a love so powerful it dared to challenge the finality of death itself, only to be soured into an eternal curse. It is the fundamental story of how life and death were separated, how the beautiful and the terrifying were given their own domains. Izanagi's final act of purification, of washing away the stains of the underworld, gave birth to the three most noble children: Amaterasu, the light of the sun; Tsukuyomi, the calm of the moon; and Susanoo, the storm of the sea. And in their story, the cycle continues. The perfect order of the sun and moon is shattered by the chaos of the storm. Light is driven away by darkness. But what this final chapter teaches us is that even when the light hides itself away, even when the world is consumed by a grief that feels eternal, it is not the end. It shows that the darkness can be overcome not by force, but by wisdom; not by anger, but by laughter; not by demanding the light return, but by reminding it of its own brilliance. The mirror, the jewel, and the sword that Susanoo would later pull from the tail of a serpent would become the three imperial regalia of Japan, the sacred treasures that prove the divine lineage of the emperor. They are not just symbols of power, but symbols of this epic journey. The mirror that coaxed the sun from its cave, the jewel that adorned the heavens, and the sword that tamed the storm. The story of Japan's creation is not just about how islands were formed or gods were born. It is a timeless human story written on a cosmic scale. It is about the beautiful, fragile balance between order and chaos, love and hate, creation and destruction. It is a reminder that even after the most harrowing journey into the land of the dead, after darkness has fallen and all hope seems lost, a clever plan, a joyful dance, and a moment of self-reflection can be enough to bring back the sun.